In this video, we are going to discuss about one of the most important SSAS interview question, that is define name calculation. So what is name calculation in SSAS? So name calculation is nothing but an alias column that you can create for a table in the data source view. As you can see here, I'm in data source view and I have a lot of tables selected, not lot, some 7-8 tables selected into my data source view from the data source. Now, where I can create this this name calculation. When you right click on the table, you can create a name calculation by selecting the option new name calculation. So the best example why we need this option when I have a table and I have all the columns, all the information, then why I need this option in my data source view. So you need to explain in such a way that the advantage of having the name calculation should be pretty clear, and there should not be any other question by the interviewer after you explain what is the use and advantage of the name calculation. Here we go. The name calculation, as I said, it is for alias column, or you can create a new column based on the existing columns in the table. For example, if you take the dim customer table, you can see in SQL Server, this is the dim customer table, and you have 3 columns for the name. One is first name, another one is middle name, and the third one is last name. But typically no user wants to see or want to have or not 3 different columns for one entity or one object, that is customer name, that is going to be displayed in the reports. So this is not the ideal way of having the data to pull into your reports. Okay, the best way of having the name while storing the data into your data warehouse or the database is 3 different columns, but while retrieving, people want to merge all these 3 and get it as one single column. Now, how you can do that? It's pretty simple in SQL Server. Comma, first name is the one, comma, plus I want to add some space between the first name, middle name, and the last name. So I'm concatenating the space here using this particular part, and I'm gonna add middle name. Okay, fine. And I'm gonna add some space again, and I'm gonna add last name as I'll name it as full name. Okay, so if I execute it, you can see all the columns are retrieved, and also the full name and column which I've created by using 3 different columns of the same table, that is first name, middle name, and the last name. And here there is some correction. If you see, there are some null values for the name. It is because the middle name of these guys or last name of these guys is null. So in SQL Server, if you have a string value, concatenating with null will become null. So first name has some value, but when it concatenates with the middle name, which is null, it is becoming null. Okay, so what you need to do is convert this null to some blank. You don't need to have anything, just convert it into blank. Now let's see whether it's getting the full name for those guys who has middle name, null value as the middle name. Perfect. So this is working fine, and this is how you will use the full name column, alias column, or calculator column in SQL Server when you have to pull the data into your reports. Now, how you can achieve this in your SSAS projects? So to achieve the same, you have the concept called named calculation. So named calculation is nothing but an alias column on a SQL Server table or the underlying table. So how you can create that? If you go to the bits environment, that is SQL Server data tools here, when you right click on the table, when you select the new name calculation, it has three input values. One, you have to give the column name, another one description about this column, and the third one is expression. So if you go back to your SQL query, so you have the column name here. So I'm copying the same, and you have the description. You can describe it. This column stores the full name of the employee by concatenating first name, middle name, and last name. This is the description. Actually, it's not required, but I've given just to make the work easy for the next guys who's going to work on the same cube, or to my fellow teammates. So the expression is nothing but the SQL expression. What you have given here, the same expression will do. So any valid SQL expression for a calculated column will work fine in the name calculations here. So if I click on OK, you can see a calculated column or new named calculation is created, and you can see an icon called icon similar to calculator icon. So that means this is the named calculation. Okay, now let's see whether it works fine or not by exploring the data. So when I explore the data, there should be a column at the end with the name, full name, and it has all the full names. So in your analysis service cubes, you are not going to use this first name, middle name, and the last name as attributes. Instead, you prefer to use full name as your attribute. Okay, so this is the named calculation in short. So what kind of expressions you can give in for this named calculation? So whatever the expressions that are valid in your SQL select statements, the same expressions you can give in the named calculation. For example, this is one simple example. I'm giving some hard-coded value 1 as test column. So this is valid in SQL because the expression will evaluate by adding one column and replacing the value 1 in the newly created column. So this is a valid expression in SQL. So this is a valid in your named calculation too. First, let me create the column, give the column name, test column, and expression is just 1. Description, hard-coded value. Let's see. So it has created one column, test column. That's it. When you export the data, you'll get the data which you have provided. That is 1 in this particular case. In the same way, you can give some date columns. For example, let me add one new named calculation, date time. I'll give the expression as get date. Get date is a valid one in SQL, so it will be created date time in new calculated column, and the value of the particular column will be the current system or server date time. And also you can use functions in your expression. For example, month, I'll use month of get date. You know what get date will do and what month will do. So it will get the month of that particular server date and time. So let me explore and see the data, whether it's fetching the correct data or not. And the current month is 10, working perfectly fine. I used functions to get this. The function is a month function, and this is get date function to get the current system date and time. So this is about the named calculation, and in short, the named calculation is nothing but an alias column or a calculated column at data source view level. This is very important. You have to highlight the point that it is at the data source view level, and all the changes that you have made for the dim customer table, that is adding 4 different calculated new named calculations at the data source view level, will not have any impact in the database. For example, if you go back to your database here, you will not find those columns because it is only up to data source view of SSAS. So if you go to dim customer, it's just plain dim customer table, and you will not have all those junk 4 columns which you have created using the new named calculation option. And one more important point to remember when you create the named calculation is you cannot create the named calculation on the named queries. So if you ask me what these named queries are, I'm going to make a video on that. Just wait for that. So when you have a named query, this is a table, and you can create a named query in the data source view. If you create a named query based on a table, then you cannot create a calculated column, or sorry, new named calculation on the named queries. Also, one more important thing to keep in mind is whatever the named calculations that you're creating at the data source view level will be executed, will be evaluated at the time of processing of the queue. As you all know, it has multiple phases. One is deployment, and then processing, and then querying. Once the processing is done, people query the data using MDX queries. You all very well know about that. So here, let me take the pen. So when you design the cube with a named calculation here, and when you process the cube, when you process the bits to a database in your analysis services, this is the time when the expression will be evaluated and the value will be loaded into the cube. So by the time when you write an MDX query to get this particular full name column or test column or datetime column, it is already calculated and the values are stored in your cube. So it won't be calculated at the time of MDX execution. It will be calculated at the time of processing of the cube. So the performance of the MDX will be little better. It will be pretty good because it is already calculated. That means pre-calculated in your cube. So that is one of the beautiful. That is one of the advantage of this named calculations. So the advantages which we see overall, it's you can create calculated columns based on any valid SQL expression. You can go for a constant value which you may need it in your analysis service cubes. You can go for some URL which you want. You can go for some calculated columns like tax amount, sales amount divided by tax amount is blah 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 amount, so something like that. And the second thing is all these calculated columns, new numeric calculations, are pre-calculated during the time of cube processing. The performance of the MDX queries will be better if you query this data, the calculated columns data. So this is about the name of calculations, and hope you understood the concepts and you can explain it in a better way when you face the question in your interviews. And in the next video, let's discuss about the calculated member, which is a little opposite to the named calculation. And we also discuss about the differences between the calculated member and the named calculation, which one is having upper hand, higher advantages, and so on. So watch for the next video too. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.